Are you asleep?
Yes.
Is he fast asleep?
Yes.
Well, hey there, Picard fans. Wait a minute. Picard fans wouldn't be watching videos like this on YouTube. They'd pay their $7 and actually be watching Star Trek Picard. What exactly are you doing here? Okay, so I got like an hour and a half to kill until Star Trek Picard's 5th episode premieres at 2 in the morning here, U.S. Central Time. So, just as a little bit of a experiment and I guess filler for the show here, and just a way to keep myself occupied, I'm going to watch the Critical Drinkers Star Trek Picard Episode 4 review. And you can watch me watch it. It's amazing. It's like infinity.
Oh, good, an Audible commercial. It's good stuff right
So
there.
here we are again, dear viewer, not so boldly going once more into the world of Star Trek Picard. Our mission, to seek out half-decent storylines and original plot ideas. Y'all must be mistaken. I'm not feeling very confident about this one. It's fair to say that Star Trek Picard's gotten off to kind of a rocky start over the past few weeks. The first episode was a rushed and confusing hodgepodge of half-baked ideas and contrived action sequences, all based around a world that feels as much like Star Trek as Lily Singh feels like a talented comedian. Episode 2 spent most of its time setting up the stakes and characters for the rest of the season without having a strong narrative of its own, while Episode 3 was such a fucking non-entity that I didn't even bother reviewing it, because honestly I couldn't think of anything interesting to say about it, which...
I've had some people take issue with my way of phrasing it as a 3-part pilot. I guess you could say prelude, but episodes 1 through 3 of Star Trek Picard basically function as the pilot episode, just chopped up into bits. Even though it was not necessarily produced and aired as a pilot, it still does all the same stuff. It gives you the basic setup and then ends off with the characters off to go on their little adventure after, getting a crew together and getting a ship and all that. It's all stuff that should have been crammed into the first 2 episodes with a clear continuation between the two. So in many ways, yes, I do agree the 3rd episode was a little superfluous. But I don't know, I mean, there's worse crimes in the world.
brings us neatly along to Episode 4, Absolute Condor. Sorry, Absolute Candor. If nothing else, it was certainly, interesting enough for me to make a video about it, though probably not for the reasons CBS intended. So let's begin this journey, shall we? Absolute Candor starts us off with yet another tedious flashback to the events of 14 years ago, because I guess we haven't seen this narrative clusterfuck from enough different points of view already. But for anyone who's not familiar with the series, basically, the Romulan home planet was about to blow up, so the Federation launched a big rescue effort, spearheaded by Picard, but then some assholes destroyed their shipyards, so they called the whole thing off and a lot of Romulans died. Anyway, this time we're on a Romulan refugee planet, where survivors are being resettled while the evacuation continues. And for some reason, it's a delightful looking place with solid, well-established buildings and infrastructure, clean water, plentiful food supplies, and a happy and prosperous population. And I couldn't help but think, what the fuck is going on here? This looks more like a tourism commercial than a refugee camp. Why does everyone look so comfortable and relaxed? Jesus, Picard even shows up looking like the man from Del Monte. The man from Del Monte says yes. And yeah, I know Dave Cullen got there first with that joke, but shut up, I came up with it independently, so I'm keeping it in there. Anyway, the whole thing seems totally at odds with the events as I understand them. The evacuation of the Romulan homeworld was supposed to be a desperate race against time, to save as many people as possible before their sun exploded. These refugees should be frightened, confused, and desperate for news about friends and family back home. Picard should be exhausted and worn out, devoting every waking moment to organising the rescue efforts. But the script is like, nah, it'll be fine. Why depict a realistic refugee situation when you can contrast this cheerful place with the godforsaken dump it turns into in the present day for some really clunky and manipulative storytelling later in the episode. So Picard chats with the leader of the fuck it. A bunch of warrior nuns who run the place. Yep, that's the thing now. The Romulans have a society of warrior nuns.
Because the plot of this episode needed to happen.
I've seen a lot of people make comparisons to the Romulan settlement on Vashti as saying it's Lord of the Rings-esque, and calling the new Romulan character that swears his blade to Picard's quest as being a little Legolas-esque. It's not an elf thing. That was very much a tropes from kung fu and samurai movies, sort of a thing, and in that context, female monks are called nuns. So that's why we have warrior nuns. It's not like a Catholic nun thing. It's just nun is what you call the feminine monk. That's it. Be sure to tell me how I'm wrong in the comments below.
He also plays at sword fighting with a young orphan boy who's living with them, and becomes a kind of surrogate father to him. Never mind though, I'm sure that won't be relevant later in the episode. But then, oh no, Picard gets a phone call saying that Mars has been blown up by the androids. Sorry, synthetics. I prefer the term artificial person myself. I'll get it right one day, don't you worry. And the rescue mission has been called off, so Picard gets sad and leaves to sort everything out. Then he disappears for 14 years. Did his watch stop? Or did he realise he was never going to get any action from the warrior nuns and bailed out to bag himself a sweet Irish Romulan housekeeper instead? Perhaps we shall never know the full truth. Flash forward to the present day, and Picard and the gang are in a race against time to rescue diverse female character before those crazy Romulans find and kill her. They're on a ship belonging to a roguish male captain who doesn't actually have a crew, but rather a bunch of holograms that he just kind of activates whenever they're needed. And for some
reason, they all look exactly like him, which kind of...
Okay, well, maybe it's a little narcissistic that he has all of his holograms look like himself, but the concept of Rios's holographic ship that's basically just seems to be just nothing but just holodecks everywhere kind of fits in the overall trajectory of the kind of technology that Starfleet seemed to have been developing in the latter seasons of Voyager and DS9. So I don't really see that as a valid thing to complain about. The exterior of Rios's ship is far more jarringly out of place in Star Trek than the idea of him using a bunch of holographic generators to have a crew of himself. You know, and if you don't like other people, and you kind of like just learn to only trust yourself, then go figure you want your holo crew to look like you, perhaps. I don't know.
It made me wonder.
if you're on your own and you've got the ability to create a customized hologram in any form, why not choose something a little more aesthetically pleasing? Also, it looks kind of confusing visually when you've got multiple versions of the same character on screen at the same time and you're not sure which is the real one. Anyway, there's also Raffi, the strong, diverse female character who lost her commission in Starfleet when Picard resigned because she was his assistant or something. Isn't that logical? Even though she totally didn't want to resign, and there's no reason to suggest her conduct or performance warranted such an action. Nah, whatever. The plot needed it to happen, I guess, so here she is. Raffi's still kind of pissed off at Picard, and she's vowed never to work with him again after what happened last time, which kind of makes me suspect she doesn't really understand the meaning of words. She and Picard are on this ship together, cooperating with each other, exchanging information, and completing tasks in order to progress towards a mutually beneficial end goal. Like, isn't that the very definition of working together? Oh, and brilliant female scientist is also there because, well, I guess the script will think of something later. But right now, she's just an annoying arsehole that babbles on about space being really big. What's a brilliant scientist you are. Also, it took me a while to realise this, but her eyes are disturbingly close together, and now that I've noticed it, I can't not see it. And because of this video, neither can you. Anyway, she keeps pestering roguish male captain while he's trying to read a book in peace. Jesus, she's like a fucking child whining for attention. Regardless.
You know, the Girardi thing in episode, I guess it was episode 3, they had a scene where now she's approached by Commodore O, and then it cuts away. They don't really show what they talk about. Then, like, at the very end of the fight Picard and his two housekeepers were having with those Romulan bikers, she shows them at the end and shoots one of them and acts all like, oh, what a coincidence that I showed up at the time I showed up, but I can't help but suspect that she might be duplicitous, a little bit of a double agent, something hinky going on, because otherwise why cut away from her conversation with the head of Starfleet Security the way they did? So, I'm thinking there's going to be something going on with Jurati. Also, we've heard rumors that she's a transgender character and that she was born male. Is she actually Bruce Maddox, maybe? Wouldn't that be weird?
Let's pay
Particular attention to this scene, dear viewer, because it's a perfect example of the amazing writing in this show. So roguish male captain is getting kind of impatient because she keeps interrupting him, and when she mentions that she used to do the same exact thing to another guy in her life, roguish male captain asks what he did about it, and she's like, nothing, because he was my father. Now, you might think this would be a good opportunity for our man here to fire back with a little quip or a passive-aggressive remark of some kind. Something along the lines of, well, I'm not your dad, so I don't have to put up with you. You know, something that would establish him as the kind of guy who's initially cold and dismissive towards strangers and who doesn't take shit from anyone, especially on the bridge of his own starship. I mean, the guy uses emergency holograms of himself instead of having an actual crew, which suggests to me that he's not very good around other people. Wouldn't a tense interaction like this be a good way to reinforce that idea? But nah, he just sits there in silence and waits for the next dumb question to come rolling in from not-so-brilliant female scientists. Now, I know this is just a tiny little example, but this failure to show initiative, take command of a conversation, or even just have a good bit of verbal sparring is something I keep noticing amongst the male characters in Picard. They're passive and submissive instead of being active and independent. They take insults and criticism, but they never give anything back, like they're afraid to open their mouths or something. Meanwhile, the women are all aggressive, assertive, and domineering, and it just seems a little unbalanced. Anyway, on with whatever passes for a plot. So Raffi gets angry when she finds out that Picard is taking them on a detour to the planet from his flashback. And to be honest, I fully agree with her on this one. Why are you doing this, JL? You're supposed to be in a race against time to save diverse female character, not dropping in to catch up with old friends. I love how he's even taken the time to set up a holographic reproduction of Chateau de Picard, so he can kick back and relax in his spare time. What the fuck? You know what Picard had back on the Enterprise when he wasn't needed on the bridge? A captain's ready room, and that was perfectly adequate for him. He didn't need any of this self-indulgent shit, like he's a little child that might get homesick or something. Also, I feel like this script doesn't really understand the concept of pace and urgency. You can't set up a desperate race against time to drive the events of your entire show, and then just put it on hold whenever it becomes inconvenient. It's hard to feel tension when nothing that happens has any real consequences. So what's the vital mission that's taking our man JL back to the flashback planet? Well, apparently he's decided that he needs a warrior to protect them, and what better place to go than the planet of warrior nuns? Wow, it's a shame you don't already have two highly experienced and reliable operators cleaning your space toilet back at the chateau, eh? You know, the ones that totally wipe the floor with a fully armed assault team. And the thing that makes this situation even dumber is
that was
okay, maybe it could have been executed better, but the people complaining about the Shad Vosh agents attacking Picard and his assistants at his chateau, and that the fact that they didn't all get killed by that. I mean, like, well, I mean, what did you expect? They're going to lose and all die, and that was the end of the series. 3 episodes in, Picard gets shot. The end. They're trying to establish some sort of sense of urgency and danger, and so having a direct confrontation in their home base with the enemy kind of makes sense on that front.
possible is that the people he wants to recruit are basically space ninjas who specialize in hand-to-hand combat. Great, that's just what you need in a universe where advanced particle beam weapons are easily obtainable and can be used by virtually anyone.
Sulu was a sword fighter, and Picard, I mean, I swear half the reason why they have any of the sword fighting in episode 4 is due to the fact that, like, it's already been established that Picard was into fencing, and so it's a way to bring that little kernel of his character and to show it off.
And I couldn't help but think, what is the fucking point in leaving behind two highly effective and loyal allies, diverting from your extremely urgent mission and wasting precious time, all to enlist the help of someone who's less useful than the people you already have? You know, it really pisses me off when sci-fi shows try to present swords as still being viable weapons, despite the fact they went out of fashion more than a century ago, because they were basically useless in the face of automatic infantry weapons. Okay, you're stick with it. Roll that. Wouldn't want to face a machine gun without this.
Yeah, but they're stylistically cool.
On screen, and that's what we're all.
But now with new Trek, surface level flashiness with absolutely no brains behind it. Anyway, I guess it's time for more exposition. So it looks like law and order in this region has broken down over the past 14 years because the Federation pulled out, and apparently the Romulans aren't capable of governing themselves. Kind of makes you wonder where the Romulan Star Empire came from, eh? And to make matters worse, some arsehole got his hands on an old Romulan warbird that he's using to terrorize nearby planets. This place was supposed to be protected.
Yeah, I've made the point before. And I got a comment on a previous video for even trying to bring it up, because, well, you know, yes, towards the end of the Roman Empire, they did include a bunch of other people as Roman citizens, but that was towards the end of the empire and arguably a contributing factor to the collapse of Rome. But in the early days of the empire, and in the many, not all, but many classical era empires, it was predominantly the central city that was the focus, where the government was, where all the actual citizens of the empire were. Everyone else was conquered and subjugated. There are exceptions. The Persians were rather cosmopolitan and whatnot, and towards the end, Rome did have various paths to citizenship. However, that being said, without Rome, Rome fell. Without Constantinople, Byzantium fell. The idea that with Romulus destroyed, Remus destroyed, and several other nearby star systems probably, if not outright destroyed by the blast, heavily affected by gamma radiation and other cosmic rays that were released into the immediate vicinity by a star-going supernova. The Roman Star Empire, they haven't definitively said it's dead and gone in this series yet, but it would be reeling. It would be reeling terribly. The loss of infrastructure and personnel and all that other kind of stuff. Yeah. Without Rome, the Roman Empire is no more. Without Constantinople, the Byzantium Empire, aka Eastern Rome, was no more. Without your central capital city, it's hard to hold things together. Yes, the United States would probably handle having Washington, D.C. destroyed, because we have a whole bunch of other, like, reserve important major cities, and we're not designed as that kind of empire. So it's not a fair comparison.
By the Fenris Rangers, whatever the fuck they are, but there's apparently not enough of them to maintain the peace, so that's looking bad. Why am I telling you all this shit, you might ask? Because I want you to get some sense of just how much exposition and world building this show tries to cram into like the first 10 minutes of the episode. There's so many different factions and events to get your head around that they all kind of blend together into an undefined mush, and the implementation is so clunky and awkward. This is the kind of conversation that would never actually happen between real people, because everyone involved should have known all of this stuff long before they even got to this point. Anyway, they get to the flashback planet, and there's a big defensive shield around it, meaning it's impossible to land or beam down, but then Picard beams down anyway, so fuck knows what the point of that was. And once he arrives, he finds the place is now a dump filled with criminals and lowlifes. Look, there's even a racist keep out sign written in English on a planet composed entirely of Romulans. Isn't that logical?
God forbid the audience be able to read the damn sign.
It's not often enough.
I mean, we're already in a galaxy where everyone's speaking English.
Genuinely managed to do that.
Me, Picard. Anyway, everyone's pissed at him because I guess he didn't do enough to help them 14 years ago. I'd like to point out that Picard is literally the only reason that any of
Them are alive.
It's
and
tobacco.
So, but apparently nobody else.
thinks to mention that, including Picard. So, whatever, I guess. If he won't defend himself, I'm certainly not going to do it for him. So he tracks down the leader of the Space Ninjas, and she's mad that he basically abandoned them, and the only reason he's here now is because he wants something from them. And when you put it like that, it is kind of a dick move. I love how Patrick Stewart sits through this entire scene with a kind of confused, embarrassed look on his face, like he's secretly thinking, she's absolutely right. This script makes no fucking sense at all. Why did I even sign up for this show? Here is my biggest problem with this new Picard. Swap his French chateau for Craggy Island, and his delightfully full-bodied red wine for green alien titty milk, and he's basically Luke Skywalker from The Last Jedi, a broken old man who got knocked down once and never tried to rise up again. A character with absolutely no life, no goals, ambitions, ideas, or motivation, except when we're directly viewing him. He might as well have been in a coma for the past 14 years, and as hard as I try, I just can't reconcile this weak, cowardly old man with the Jean-Luc Picard I used to know. I can't live out my days as that person. That man is bereft of passion and imagination. Picard's entire life and career has been defined by his deep moral convictions and his willingness to pursue them even at great personal cost. In fact, a lot of the storylines in The Next Generation focused on the conflict between his own personal morality and his duty as a Starfleet officer. He's shown countless times that he's willing to push back against authority, disobey orders, and even risk his own ship and crew to do the right thing. This isn't a guy who would just give up on life because he bluffed about resigning and Starfleet called it. He would find another way to attack the problem. He'd become a diplomat or an activist, or he'd start a Picard Foundation or something. The point is, the one thing he wouldn't do is sit on his arse back at his chateau for 14 years while the galaxy fell apart around him. It's simply not who he is. But the script is like, nah, he'll be fine. This is the new Picard, you see. The kind of guy who can only react to things that happen to him, but not actually do anything on his own initiative. What a fucking genius writer you are, Alex Kurtzman. Thank you for this contribution to the Star Trek universe. Sheer fucking hubris. Anyway, this is where we get to the real point of the episode, if you can call it that. Remember the little kid from the flashback at the start? Well, now he's grown up into Elrond of Rivendell. And of course, because this is the new edgy Trek that tries to pander to a young audience that was never going to care about it anyway, he's an angsty teenager that's angry at his surrogate father for leaving him. Those deadbeat dads say, I am not a merry man. So Picard tells Elrond that he's sorry, because that seems to be his whole reason for being these days. He's just terribly sorry all the time for all the mistakes he's made and all the people he's failed and let down. Who is this bald imposter pretending to be my beloved Jean-Luc? But Elrond tells him to piss off, so Picard wanders into a nearby tavern and provokes a Romulan gangster into fighting him. And this pushes Elrond to kill the guy by slicing his fucking head around to save you, you dick. What did you expect him to do? Engage the guy in polite conversation? I could point out that if Elrond had been armed with, say, a phaser, he could have just stunned the guy and saved Picard's life without killing anyone. But nah, swords are totally better. So they beam up to the ship because the script says that can happen now. And Picard introduces Elrond to everyone, and Raffi's like, great, a boy with a stick. I am not a merry man. I'd like to bring you back to my earlier point about dialogue between men and women in this show. This situation would be an ideal time for Elrond to fire back with some clever put down of his own, or even moving close to her with his hand on his sword and mutter some thinly veiled threat, warning her not to insult or underestimate him. You know, the sort of thing that would have to establish him as a cold, ruthless, badass killer machine like he's supposed to be. But nah, he just stands there like a fucking plank of wood and takes it, just like every other man in this show. Just let him insult you and walk all over you guys. That's guaranteed to earn their respect. Speaking of having no respect for a character, weak male scientist is having a nap on the Borg cube when his sister sneaks into his bedroom and threatens him because he's not getting any results and he's basically a waste of skin. And it was weird because their previous interactions suggested they were working together on equal footing, but now I guess he's just a cowardly whipping boy that she can abuse whenever she feels like it. Are you spotting a theme with the male characters in this show? Anyway, whatever, it's time for a cheesy space battle to round out this delectable banquet of entertainment. Remember that stolen bird of prey I mentioned earlier? Well, the script decides it's time for it to conveniently show up, and it immediately attacks Picard's ship without knowing anything about it, why it's here, or what its combat capabilities are. I guess the captain is just a dick like everyone else. The weird thing about this battle is that it never really seems like they're in much danger. Roguish male captain even mentions that their ship is faster and more maneuverable than their opponent, so you'd think it would make sense to fly rings around them and just wear them down with prolonged fire. But then another ship comes in to save them, even though they shouldn't need saving, and it's never made clear what their situation is. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the other ship is damaged, and they beam the pile over before the ship
crashes, except...
And I'm pretty sure the other ship is a Delta Flyer.
This is 7 of 9 from Star Trek
Voyager. You know that show which never actually crossed over with the Next Generation, so the 7 of 9 meeting Picard doesn't actually mean anything in this context? Yeah, that one. Anyway, she passes out and the episode ends and that's it. What's a strange experience this was? You know, if I had to pick a word to describe absolute candor...
My word is poontang.
No, my word would be contrived. Nothing that's happening feels logically consistent or even believable. It's a story that plays out because it has to, because it needs to accomplish certain things, and it can't think of a smart way to do it, so it just forces in events, characters, and decisions that feel totally out of place. Picard is now a whiny, defeated, cowardly old man who keeps apologising for existing and doesn't have an ounce of authority or charisma left in him. There's still no explanation for why the Romulans couldn't evacuate their own planet instead of expecting the Federation to do it for them. Everyone fucking hates Picard, even though he was instrumental in saving their lives. Absolute candor, 15 minutes of actual storyline stretched out into an entire episode. It doesn't really tell us anything new about past events or Picard's involvement. Diverse female character is still messing around on the Borg cube, and about the only noteworthy thing she does is go ice skating in an air vent with weak male scientist. Really, our gang are in the exact same position by the end as they were at the beginning, except they now have a couple of extra characters to add to an already bloated cast. I mean, I doubt 7 of 9 is going to stick around for long, but Elrond seems like he'll be integrated into things permanently. Wow, can't wait for all the strong female characters to start bossing him around too. The overarching storyline is left in a holding pattern while this episode plays out, and for me, it suggests there might be a larger problem with Picard. There isn't actually that much of a story to work with. It's like there's too many episodes and not enough plot to fill them with. Also, the writers don't seem to know how to work within the constraints of a ticking clock, which was supposed to be the whole point of this season. Ultimately, Picard feels like a show that's going nowhere fast and not making a particularly good job of it. It's meandering and badly paced, filled with too many characters, too much exposition, and too many lame attempts to mimic the action and adventure of Star Wars. A show that desperately wants to say something profound, but lacks the intelligence, the experience, and the finesse needed to actually express it. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder if it's even worth carrying on with it. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Go away now.
It's worth carrying on with, I'm sure, Critical Drinker. Since you got like 50,000+ views in less than 6 hours. Oh, I think you're going to continue on with this show. Alright. Well, there's that. Yay. Really gets you excited. Anyway, got an hour to go to the show, so I'll talk to y'all afterwards, I guess.
Don't tempt me, my darling. Help me.
We could still meet.
How?
We could do what I did tonight.
Drug his wine. He'll begin to grow suspicious if he falls asleep every night. Besides, his body will grow accustomed to it. It'll gradually cease to have any effect. And then, my darling, one night in your eagerness to see him asleep, you might kill him.
Well, okay. It is now 2:20. Star Trek Picard should have premiered 20 minutes ago on my Amazon. And I just refreshed the page and it's still not there. So either they're having an issue getting it uploaded, or for some reason we're not getting Star Trek Picard this week? Why this week? Is it because of President's Day? Okay, well, Shame I already rendered the first half of this episode where I go over the Critical Drinkers video, because, well, shit. I already did the titles, saying this is going to be an episode 5 review, so, sorry. I guess episodes 5 review is going to be a separate video that will come out as soon as I'm able to watch it. I will say, from having edited the earlier footage that you had just seen before this, of me watching the Critical Drinkers video, I really must ask the question, what is the entertainment value of that? Of not just his videos, but Dave Collins, all manner of various characters here on YouTube who make a living out of dissecting various TV shows, movies, and whatnot that are popular, or were popular once upon a time. Because I'll say, just looking at my own facial expressions that entire video, I never smiled, I didn't laugh at anything. His video followed a format and structure that I've noticed for a while now that a lot of YouTube critics do, where they say they're critiquing it and they have critical things to say, but for the most part what they're really doing is they're just describing the entire plot point for point in a snarky, like, oh, and then this happens, and then, oh my god, they went and got this, and like, oh, and that's so stupid, and then throw some arbitrary clip from some other show in there, and I just... It takes all the wind out of your sails to have any interest to watch these things after watching this stuff. I guess that's kind of, my core problem with a lot of the YouTube critics as they are in their current form. It's not that I necessarily disagree with the criticisms. There are valid points. It's real similar, I guess, to kind of how I felt about Star Wars over the last several years, where in spite of its flaws, there were things I liked and appreciated about The Last Jedi. But my attempts to try to understand and reconcile with the people who just wouldn't accept the movie kind of corrupted my own ability to enjoy not just The Last Jedi, but all Star Wars in general, because it's just such a fucking bummer. Like it's not entertaining to watch these videos, and there's created this whole weird subculture of nerds who don't actually watch any of the shows that they're talking about, that aren't watching Discovery, that aren't watching the new Star Wars movies, that aren't watching whatever, but they know all about it, and they have big opinions about it, and they can leave big, long, elaborate comments on various other, internet forums about what they think about these things, but they're not ever actually watching them and judging them for themselves. They're just getting it all filtered through YouTube critiques that, instead of really diving deep into the mythology and symbolism of these properties and what these stories are trying to tell in a way that Rob Ager or Wisecrack try to do, instead, like I say, they just break down the plot point for point and say it really snarky. So it's like and then Luke throws away his lightsaber. Luke's signature move, the whole way he defeated the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, was by throwing away his lightsaber. So go figure, he throws away his lightsaber. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Star Wars. We were here to talk about Star Trek Picard, which, it's not a perfect show. I mean, the writing is really bad in some spots. Really, more offensively, the acting has been really shitty from Patrick Stewart. He's been perfectly fine, but a few of his co-stars just haven't been feeling it. Especially that girl who plays Raffi. She is just so obviously on a set talking to Patrick Stewart and not her character. And that could also be partly the writing. But it doesn't matter. I'm willing to give it a shot. There's the unfortunate reality that Star Trek as we knew it was completely bulldozed after Enterprise. I don't know if you remember seeing any of the shows they had on the History Channel at the time, but they stripped down all the props, all the sets, everything was torn apart, and what wasn't destroyed was auctioned off, and is the original models for ships, phasers, all sorts of things, uniforms, props, the whole kit and caboodle, this whole warehouse full of stuff that Star Trek had on hand so that they can continue making Star Trek shows and movies and cut a little bit of the budget off because they already have, 40% to 50% of just the little knickknacks that they need to make the movie already made, and they can just be a little refaced or redressed or relit a little bit, and bam, totally new, whatever. All that's gone. All the original creatives are dead or have long since moved on from this. Ron Moore, I doubt they'd be able to throw enough money at Ron Moore to get Ron Moore to come back to Star Trek. Brannon and Braga have exhausted every possible story they could tell in the Star Trek universe. Star Trek already had the problem that it was flagging under the weight of just the sheer bulk of episodes it had, where Enterprise and Voyager were more and more starting to cannibalize, episode concepts from, other series, and sometimes their own series. They were running out of steam. And whereas, this current incarnation is certainly struggling, and I've certainly had my issues with it, it is still the reality that this is the Star Trek we have. Nothing that they're ever going to do is ever going to erase this from existence. It's part of Star Trek moving forward, and this is always going to be the awkward first steps into Star Trek floating entirely free of any direct connection to Gene Roddenberry's fingerprints. There's a path of constructive criticism that can be achieved that could hopefully help steer things in a better direction as time goes on. But the kind of criticism that's being popularized right now is not that. It's entirely destructive. It's entirely demoralizing. Like I said, by the end of just me watching that Critical Drinker review, and it's not anything specific to him. Lots of other reviewers do this. Unfortunately, even Robert Meyer Burnett, who portrays himself as being, like the jovial, happy Mr. Rogers of nerddom, and in many ways, that was like the attractive thing to following his content, going all the way back to when I first saw him popping up with John Schnepp on whatever that Heroes show they had back on Collider, or hell, maybe it was still on AMC at the time. Regardless, he was always just real into everything and was always boasting about his hot toys. But he's been turning increasingly sour over the last year. Somewhat post-contact with the Midnight's Edge crowd. Another channel which, yes, factually accurate, but man, it doesn't get you at all in any way excited about the franchise. And also just does these point-for-point plot breakdown type reviews that allow the viewers to never actually have to go and watch these things. They've had the entire story structure explained to them comprehensively. They know everything that happens. They know all the characters. They know all the big moments. They've even seen clips of them and stuff, so they can even visually describe it. It's like having the story in your head, but you've never actually really seen it and filtered it yourself. There's a phenomenon I've noticed a lot, and it's not entirely YouTube-based, but YouTube is certainly part of the cycle of it, where whole narratives are crafted around basically what the first reviews to get out about any given thing get watched by second-degree reviewers and then third-degree reviewers and so on and so forth. And so the people who get those first few opinions out describing something as a certain thing, like saying that the Romulans on the planet in episode 4 are like elves, which is racist. To compare pointy-eared Romulans and Vulcans to elves, that's racist. Don't do that. Completely ignoring, it's totally just a kung fu trope. I
think I'd die if he didn't come into my bed every night. It's such a little step to take from making him sleep at night to making him sleep forever.
And you'll need something stronger. Something that can be used in small doses will never be detected.
Get it for me.
You're sure?
Yes. Yes. For you.
You
And afterwards.
I divorced my wife and we'll get married. talk to myself.
Basically, within a day, all of YouTube will be parroting the talking points invented by just a couple of reviewers who crank out an article or crank out a video in the wee hours of the morning. So maybe I'll be lucky, and today, by the end of the day, YouTube will all be parroting my stupid opinions and takes on episode 5. Because obviously I'm going to have the first episode 5 review, because episode 5 still hasn't come out yet. Let me double check that. It's not that there's anything wrong with the criticism. I'm not saying people shouldn't be allowed to have their opinions or shouldn't be able to voice their stuff. But really, what is the entertainment value here? I mean, how much of this is kind of a subtle form of theft in a way, where by describing the plot of Rise of Skywalker, by describing the plot of Captain Marvel, by describing the plot of Star Trek Discovery, by describing the plot of Star Trek Picard, point for point, with images from the show, so that if someone watching it feels like they've watched that show, they feel like they can converse with people who've watched the show, they feel like they can hold any kind of a solid opinion on that show, without actually having watched the show itself. How is that not stealing that audience to yourself? It's like, hey kid, don't pay $6.99 a month for your CBS All Access, so that the artists actually, can be paid for what they've done and, get the credit they're due and all that. Here's what we're going to do. Here, I'm going to give you this junk version. I'm going to sell you in a dank alley real quick. And in return for you pumping up my numbers on my YouTube channel so I can get some ad revenue. Or maybe sucker a couple of you into come on to buy Patreon. It's a form of theft. It's a real subtle form of theft. And this isn't quite really like a copyright thing, but I do understand why some companies are a little uptight maybe about the reviews, because, like, what is the review doing? A review is not reviewing it plot point by plot point. A review is supposed to be talking about cultural contexts and visuals, and it's supposed to be about the artistry and the intellect of the writing and all that kind of stuff. It's not just supposed to be like a technical review of what's in it. That's lazy, and I don't really think that's good for the nerd community, if you can even say we have one. I also, like, the more I think back on it, back to the pre-internet days, I cast my mind back into high school, which was right around the time that Star Trek The Next Generation was going off the air, and Voyager and Deep Space Nine were coming on. And I remember Trekkies/Trekkers back then, and what annoying absolute fuckshits they were at the time. So, I just, at times I have to ask myself, has Star Trek fans always hated Star Trek?
No lovers for you, then. You'll have to behave.
If I don't?
You don't. And I'll lock you in a room without any clothes. And I'll visit you 3 or 4 times a day.
Perhaps you'll be too tired. Perhaps you'll only manage once.
Then I'll send my guard to stand in for me.
Would you really?
Yes,
How many?
3 or 4.
I might not let them.
You'll be forced.
Against my will?
Yes,
While you were there,
yes.
I'd struggle and scream.
But no use.